our next presentation explores how 5G communication is facilitating pervasive connectivity and how edge computing enhances real-time data processing locally, with examples from the intersection with AI, enabling and enhancing efficiency, decision-making and scalability. I'd like to invite James McKee to the stage. James has been busy setting up during the morning tea break. James is the Regional Sales Manager of Meraki IoT APJC at Cisco. James has had extensive experience in customer partner and vendor roles and has been instrumental in presenting cloud-managed technology to the enterprise market. A reminder, again, questions through the app or we can take them directly off the floor. Please welcome James McKee from Cisco.
Thank you very much. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to pop these on here to make this interesting. I'm choosing to do some live demonstrations today instead of just static content, just to kind of make it a little bit different. Most people like that rather than standard presentations. So give me 1 second. We'll get set up. I'm good. You're good to go. Thank you. Thank you so much. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for everybody for joining the session today. I wanted to make something a little bit different compared to a standard presentation. I wanted to do some live demos and actually talk about the concepts that 5G, IoT, and things like Edge I actually bring to market. Because many of the customers that I speak to struggle with those concepts and actually bring them together to deliver valuable services for their customers. So I thought we'd kind of dissect that a little bit today. So who am I? Name is James McKee. I've been in the tech industry for about 30 years, doing I guess a whole range of different things. I guess I like to solve problems is probably the best way to describe what I do. At the moment, I lead the Meraki IoT business across the APJC region. Now, a lot of you may not know what Meraki IoT is, but essentially, in a language that this community understands, it's video surveillance or cloud-managed video surveillance and environmental sensors. If you're not familiar with that, I'm not going to really talk about that at all today. Please come and see us at the stand and we'll be happy to kind of have a conversation with you. I guess where I wanted to start today, if we look at things like 5G, and the example that I'm actually using in front of us is 5G connected, what's the key goal that we're looking to drive here? It's essentially capturing data. And the data can help us make decisions to achieve a range of different things. And if we look at, say, cameras that are pretty much pervasive and everywhere now, in essence, they're just collecting data, right? And obviously we use them for, say, risk management functions in a traditional sense. But what we also have is the ability to capture that information and use it to learn or infer new things about the environment within which they're installed. And that could be, say, counting the number of people in the room, for instance, or identifying, say, a high-risk situation where, say, some human sort of interaction might be required. So it's this data that actually becomes super critical for business. And really what we look to do is provide, I guess, the digital plumbing and that insight and interface so people can actually build solutions around this. So we're actually going to explore that a little bit today and actually do some interesting live demos, which should be fun. So how do we access this data? I guess traditionally we've built separate systems and we've had, whether it be serial communications to access telemetry data, and we've always had struggles to secure and scale that. Really with, I guess, cloud technologies, these sorts of functions have been built in by default in order to get a simple and easy outcome for customers. Doesn't mean there's not planning and architecture required. We still need to tick those boxes, but ultimately it's, I guess, about streamlining that. And while some people say, we're kind of disrupting this space, really what we're trying to do is just provide an alternative as businesses change the way in which they leverage technology. So I guess if we actually look at the topic of the talk, we're talking about the intersection of these technologies and these components. We've got 5G, obviously next gen on the back of 4G. We've got IoT, such a broad, essentially, term, which the way I look at it, it just encompasses a range of different sensors. And we're going to look at some of those specifically today. And then essentially we've got, the merging of these things. How do we take these and stitch them together to deliver solutions for customers? If we actually look at some of the key fundamental things that change, I guess I'm not going to go and bore you and read through slides, but what I will call out is increased scalability, faster transfer, increased security, and the ability to essentially carve out the way in which, say, the backhaul is delivered in order to provide a better and more reliable service for customers. So these are some of the things that allow us to actually deliver value quickly. And I guess the conversation I have all the time, and I guess I'm out of the weeds these days, I tend to talk strategically with a lot of customers, but it's about how do we get our value, as in our time to value, from being this to this. And there's a whole range of different tools that we can use to achieve that, some of them of which this industry traditionally hasn't been familiar with. And there's things like programmability, APIs. I'm not going to touch on that today. I'm just going to touch on some of the fun things. But these are whole new, concepts that actually allow us to deliver things in a different way. So we'll kind of touch on that as well. So what does all this enable? Why should I care about having these new services or this toolkit in my kit bag? And I guess that's fundamentally what this whole event's all about, right? It's enabling enhanced user experiences. And I talked about one before, and that was, say, counting the people in this room. I might be watching a particular actor move through a space to understand, what they're doing, why they're doing it. I'm not going to open the can of worms that is facial recognition, and I'm sure there's been a couple of different presentations this morning that have touched on some of the legal implications of these things. But as we extend in this presentation, we'll also touch on things like AI and what that might mean for business. That's a really interesting topic, but it's such a broad topic, and I'm going to actually focus just on a key part of that as we go through this today. But if we look at some of the examples here, things like, and this is what a lot of our customers are coming to talk to us about at our stand, things like monitoring meeting spaces, effectively cooling them and providing an environment that, say, is sustainable. Integrating with existing services like access control or alarm systems in order to kind of provide that great end-to-end operational experience that customers expect. One of the ones I talk to customers loads about these days is process automation. How do I take the data that our sensors collect and use that to turn something on or achieve a particular outcome that I can duplicate or plug into an existing process? We all know process re-engineering is expensive. So it's really like, how do we take this toolkit and plug that into those components and get the outcome that we need? And I'm going to actually share a couple of stories that I have personally helped customers solve, without going to detail, of course, around these stories and how we've applied these sort of technology components to achieve those outcomes. And hopefully you find those fun. So this is where we get into, the meat of the presentation. I really want to dig a bit further here, right? I want to actually show you what some of these things look like. Now, some of these concepts may not be fully familiar with you. I would encourage you all to put your hand up and ask any questions as we go through if something kind of captures you, or if you want me to drill into something in particular. And I'm sure we'll probably have some question time at the end as well. But really what I want you to do is get the best or the best experience you can out of this. So I want to now double on the Edge AI piece. So we've essentially set the foundation. We've talked about connectivity in this context, 5G. We've talked about IoT. And in this context, again, it's about sensors and essentially capturing the data that we need to drive outcomes for our customers. So where does AI plug into this? AI is really, this term for me is a really nice way of simplifying what AI is, right? We talk about the development of computer systems capable of performing tasks that would normally require human intelligence. I think that's a really nice way of bannering off what is a very complex term and means many different things to different people. And for me, I go into meetings with customers and I ask them, what's your strategy around AI? And a couple of different, themes come out. The first one is the governance and policy side. I'm going to park that for today. The second one is just the definition. What does it mean for each particular customer that we engage with? And it means something very different. So I'm going to kind of level set on where we're going to focus today, but also hopefully give you a bit of a perspective of how broad AI is as a topic. And really the goal here is to mimic human behavior and intelligence in an intelligent and efficient manner. Now, these toolkits, I'm going to be completely transparent here, are complex. Lots of moving parts. Can I get a show of hands? Anyone familiar with tensors and what tensors might be? I'm not going to touch on this today, but I did get one hand, but the key part here is, there's a whole, essentially, opportunity for education, but also new learning, which essentially we as an industry need to foster and help, businesses adopt. And I'm going to show you what some of that looks like today, because I think that would be kind of fun. Keith, takeaway here, it's an overarching term. Be careful to get the definitions right. I think that's one of the key things to be mindful of here. Now, before we kick off this, I just want to make sure I'm on the right network. Because we need to connect to the network I have down here in order to do the live demo. So it looks like it's on, which is good. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do an awesome demo with AI. But before we do that, subsets of artificial intelligence. Who here, put your hands up if you're familiar with generative AI. It's in the media all the time. Everybody's familiar with it. when people say AI, that's often the first thing they think about. They think generative AI and they think, oh, great, that's what we're going to focus on. That's not necessarily essentially what AI tends to mean. And it's a subset of essentially machine learning. And you'll see there in that slide, it's a very small piece of what that broader AI intersection is. And then we'll look at things like machine learning. Machine learning is really basically taking data, training a machine to do things or mimic human behavior. And that piece is where it gets a little interesting. So we're going to touch on that in a second as well. So the next thing I'm going to do is just touch on what is machine learning then, right? So it's the subset of AI that enables computers to learn. And essentially, this is without being programmed. This is essentially by taking a data set, often pictures or images, or even just data, and then actually running that through an algorithm to achieve or look for patterns. Now, we're going to actually do this live and show an example of this, which I think will be fun and interesting. But the whole idea is to make decisions based on the information that we plug into the system. The downside of this is if we don't train the system properly, we don't necessarily get the outcomes that we need. And one thing that is commonly talked about when you look at things like machine learning is accuracy. Interestingly, accuracy isn't always the key piece, although that's often what businesses focus on. It depends on whether you, say, have a false positive or a false negative in the decision you're looking to achieve, and then what that means in the context of the problem that you're trying to solve in business. So I'm not going to go into the detail of that, but it means different things to different people, and it's important to understand that distinction. Okay, moving forward now, we're going to actually drive a live demonstration. Now, live demonstrations are always fraught with danger, hence why I'm biting my fingers. Hopefully these will all work nicely, and I do these a lot, but hey, I have problems at times as well. So, but this is the best way to help people kind of understand. So what we're going to do is we're going to make Edge AI example real here, and we're going to actually use some people out of the audience to come up, and we're going to train a model live, just so you can see what that kind of looks like, and then we're going to talk about how we actually apply that. So, can I have a volunteer from the audience, please? Yes, Bill, please do come up, and let's see what we can do here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you to come here. We're going to actually create a couple of classes. Now, a class is essentially a definition of what we're going to learn. We're going to create one called Bill. And Bill, what I would like you to do is come up and stand in front of the laptop here. I'm going to turn the webcam on. And I'm going to stand out of the frame, and I'm going to basically take a few sample images of Bill. So we've done that. We've basically taken, yet again, this is the data that we're using to train a model of Bill. Now I'm going to ask Bill to step aside for a second. Please stay for a little bit longer though, however, and I'm going to create another class, and we're going to call that James. And I'm going to take a few screenshots of myself. So let's do that. We'll create some images. Then what we're going to do is basically train this model. Now, this model is training in the browser, and just for any of you that are concerned around privacy, this actually stays in the browser and is removed at the end. We're not actually storing any information, so just everybody's clear on that. Now, what I want you to see on the screen here is if I walk in front of the screen, you'll see here that it thinks that I'm very likely James, but potentially could be Bill. And if Bill walks in front of the browser, you'll see that it's actually very much Bill, right? But literally, we've done that live. We've literally trained that. And that actually gives us essentially a model that we can apply in different ways to solve different things for different people. And that's kind of cool. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate your help. So has anybody seen that done before? And like everybody talks about training machine learning models. Has anybody ever seen that? Does that help simplify what that actually means? We've done 2 classes here. Often models could have hundreds, if not thousands. In fact, generative AI models can have billions of essentially endpoints that they're trained on, which is kind of mind-boggling when you actually think about it. But when you think of it as a concept, it's kind of interesting, right? You know, we can actually start to think about how we apply these tools to solve for problems in a way that maybe, you know, we've never thought about before. And I think to me, that's kind of a really interesting approach. So back to the slides. So the next thing we want to do is talk about how we apply these essentially observations and detections to achieve, you know, different outcomes here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make sure we're connected to our network, which for some reason is not up by the... We'll just see if we can find it. And if it's not, that's fine. I have a video backup. But what we basically want to do is connect to my network here. It's not. I'm just going to reset this, and why I do this, I'm going to talk about it. So basically what this example here shows you is the application of Edge AI in the context of driving process automation. So what am I doing in this instance? I built this solution on the back of a customer. I'm not going to mention who they are, but it was a public sector customer in Victoria who had a problem with malicious actors damaging infrastructure. And what they basically came to me and said is, we want to use cameras to identify when these particular actors are in a space that impacts our service, because ultimately we're here about providing service to the community. And I said, okay, that's interesting. What have you done in the past? And they basically said, we've tried to stitch together a whole range of different services to get an outcome, but we can't get something that provides essentially the weighted data we need to be able to make informed decisions. So what I said to them is, I said, well, look, our cameras have an edge AI capability, non-trained, but also have the ability to do that as well. But the bit I want you to be mindful of here is the piece that they have allows them to identify if there's humans in the field of view. So I said, what's that look like in the context of your operational process to manage that risk? And they said, oh, we're glad you asked. It means today we have to basically send out a security guard at $450 a pop and check whether or not someone's still on site. So I said, what if we could actually capture what that looks like, send that to, say, a security operations team, and have them review that and then, say, securely click through the footage to determine whether or not they need to actually provide that outcome. So you can see here, rather than talk about the kind of tech side, what I'm really trying to demonstrate is we can take these tools and apply them to improvement in operational process. And that piece to them was mind-blowing. They said, really, we can do that? And what you can see in this example here, and hopefully I can show you live, and if I can't, due to connectivity challenges, we will show you a video. But ultimately what's happening here, I'm automatically detecting when a person walks into the field of view of the camera, and then what I'm basically doing is saying, well, are they a person? And then I'm augmenting that information with a third-party service. It could be a server sitting on site, which is obviously that whole edge AI model, but it could also be a cloud service. This example, we leveraged a cloud service. I'm sure some of you in the room might be familiar with AWS recognition. Really what I'm doing though is classifying other objects in the scene to ensure that in fact it is a positive detection of that malicious actor. And that allows us then to plug into the process that the security operations team had in place to get them out on site. And what they would do is they would look at, first of all, things like the objects, would also look at the facial analysis. What is the demographic of the individual in that space? Is it someone we might have been looking for? Is it someone we need to be aware of? And then lastly, if there's something else in the environment that might be useful, such as text detections and things like that, we can augment those as well. We would then take that information and we need to present it somehow, right? So as you're probably all aware, Cisco is a very large technology company that has many products in their portfolio. One of them is the WebEx conferencing platform. So what we're basically doing here is we're wrapping this up in an automated process and presenting this via WebEx. Now I'll see if we've got connectivity, and it doesn't look like that's come up. So I'm just going to flick to, I'll flick to a video at the end here. So let's have a look at this. So what we're basically going to do is have a look at this in a video context. So what we're basically doing is automating this process to understand actually what's happening. And then what we're doing is actually reporting that in via WebEx. So if I click on here and actually show this here, we're going to just jump through to a particular point in the video that is this detection piece. So I'm going to just play this. What's happening here is we're basically looking at what the camera can see, and you'll see down the bottom there's all this technical jargon, which is basically just a couple of API scripts that are running in an automated fashion to take a photo of what the camera sees. When that happens, it's then actually processing that, and you'll see now on the left-hand side, we're actually putting all that information together in a simple interactive form that allows the user to actually see what's been detected. You'll see now on the left, security incident detected. We've classified what the actor is in this space, and we've given them an ability to click on the review footage piece to see actually what's going on. This ultimately allows them to quickly check that assurance side of things, reduce the need to send someone out on site, and only send them when they're interested in addressing, say, like a risk position. So you can see, can everyone see the value there? It's literally changing the way in which we can operate services for our customers. So it's a very, very kind of interesting, different way of delivering that. So moving forward, I want to talk to you now about custom computer vision. We've talked about a general application of computer vision here based on edge AI, just basic people and vehicle detection. We can also train, like I showed you before, our cameras to detect anything. One of the fun things I did a couple of years ago, this is just me because I was bored, is my partner hates cockroaches, so I trained a cockroach detector. I basically took some photos of cockroaches, basically put that all together in a model and built a camera that detects cockroaches. So if we see a cockroach, we get a little alert on the phone and say we better go and find the can of spray, right? So it's really just about identifying the problem and then solving for it. What we've looked to do is actually make this accessible to people at scale and in a secure manner. So one of the cameras down here is actually running one of those trained models, and you'll see here I'm detecting a person here, tables, chairs, it could be anything. This particular model detects 92 different objects, but it's really about actually making that real. And I'm just going to see if our network's popped up, and it has. So I'll connect to this quickly. What I'll show you is this live, right? So just quickly, we're going to jump over here. And we're going to run this. Now, assuming everything's connected now, yet again, the demo gods are being kind this time. As you can see, we just had to do a quick change, but hopefully this will work kindly. And you'll see here we're actually detecting live what that camera sees there in the room. And this is in real time, and basically, you can see it detects lots of things, and we're not necessarily got the high level of accuracy in the detections, but we're doing that all on camera. There's no other edge components, no servers, whatnot. That's all being run on dedicated processor resources at the edge. So this really shows how you can enable things leveraging, say, 5G, IoT to deliver outcomes for customers. And you can see there the tech side. Not everything works perfectly either, but we can show that and get the outcome that we need. So have people seen this before, and have people seen this run like at the edge? I know it's a common theme we're starting to see become, more widely deployed, but it's kind of a pretty cool concept, right? So that's the edge AI piece. I wanted you to see that because I think that's kind of super interesting, and that's the way I did the cockroach piece. Instead of running that model, I just ran the cockroach model. And then what I did was use that as a means to automate an operational process and send me a message. And I want to tell you another story now, and this is a story born on the back of COVID, where I've brought all this together. And I guess the key message here is, obviously, we as Cisco love customers investing in our technology, but we're also very aware that businesses have their own investments across the board that they want to kind of interface with and plug into. So what I did, I had a problem to solve, and the problem I had to solve is I wasn't sure what the challenges with COVID were at the time. I'm an asthmatic, and I thought I want to stay away from people until I'm aware of kind of what's going on. So I built, on the back of our smart camera technology, a plug-in into the Apple ecosystem so I could get an alert if someone was at my front door. And then I could decide, do I really want to go and see who that is? It sounds like a simple use case, but it was about stitching it all together and making it real. So what that looked like was this. And essentially what you can see here is we have a camera on the left-hand side. I was using the people detection capability of that camera to then take that information and use telemetry protocols like MQTT. I'm not going to explain what that is today, but I'm sure it's familiar to a number of you in the room. And then plug it into a bridge, which allows us to essentially convert that into the Apple language. So Apple goes, yep, I understand what you're talking about. And what that then allows us to do is register that as a device in the Apple ecosystem. Now, I'm a bit of an Apple fanboy, and I thought, how do I make this work for me? So what I did is, you'll see in that image on the side, during COVID, and hopefully now when I get time, I like to exercise. So Peloton's one of our customers, and also one of the platforms I leverage. So I built this integration, which allows me to fully automated get a view as to what's going on my front door. And I want to show you what that looks like. So this here was the experience. So you'll see me here, exercising away in a class. And then as soon as someone actually walks on the front step, we're basically getting a picture-in-picture of the live video stream to determine, do I want to get off the bike? Do I need to engage with that person? Or do I want to kind of stay away? Now, obviously in COVID times, that was a little bit of a interesting use case. But now I find it super handy to identify when Uber Eats has been dropped off, or if I'm sitting on the couch with my kids, it's like, oh, who's at the front door? Do we need to get up? Do we want to let grandma in today? That's that sort of thing. So it's really about just changing that experience. So I think that's an important thing to realize, is that nothing's really off the table here, and often technology is not thought of as being creative. I challenge that statement. I actually think technology is really creative, and it gives us opportunity to basically solve for things that maybe we've never been able to solve before. And that's one of the key themes I just want you to take away. As we look to wrap up, there's a couple of things that I think are really important for everybody to be aware of. And this is the philosophy for success. The biggest challenge I see in customers, especially adopting things like AI and leveraging the connectivity that 5G affords and the broader sensor community that IoT brings, is defining success. If you don't define success up front, I see project after project after project failing. I don't want that for my customers, and I get disappointed because we all invest a lot of time and effort in delivering a particular outcome. But what's important here is if we get this piece right, and it comes back to the point I said earlier around accuracy versus context of problem, this actually allows us to deliver an outcome that is valued by business, has a significant investment to get the outcome that's needed, and then essentially the ability to scale that. Simon Sinek, if you haven't read this book, one of my favorite authors, it's a great book, and I think fundamentally defining why up front is really important with these sorts of projects. So I guess in conclusion, really if we look at the toolkit of 5G, IoT, and Edge AI, we all have an opportunity. And the opportunity is to solve problems in ways that we haven't solved before that provides a better interface between technology and humans. And that piece, kind of ties into the cybernetics side of things, and that's a really interesting space if you haven't looked into it. But I encourage you all to kind of explore that, because really, technology should be transparent and allow us to achieve the things that we value. So on that note, I apologize for the minor technology hiccups, but hopefully you got the theme of what I was trying to present, and I hope you've enjoyed this presentation, and I'm going to wrap up for now.
James, thank you for taking the time to set all that up. That was a really
You're
great
welcome.
demonstration to have a look at. We've got one question on the app. This is from Josh,
Sure.
And it relates to something that happened during your presentation. So 5G IoT devices, fantastic when used in areas that 5G is readily available. Multi-story shopping centres are tough to get a great signal. How do you combat your IoT devices where the eye isn't there?
That is a great question. And fundamentally, like any demo, right, it's the best way to identify problems in an environment. We saw this here briefly. But I think fundamentally it's about planning. The best way to look at this is really to plan for it. There are ways to obviously ensure connectivity in the environments that you deploy these. In some instances, we need to look at technologies that allow us to cache that information. And when we say do have comms or comms is removed, we can still maintain the assurance around the service. So my response to that would be we just need to plan and deploy the technology into. But great question, and it's a real challenge as well.
James, thank you very much. Any further questions from the floor? No,
Awesome.
Good.
Thank
Okay.
you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you very much, James.